وابتدأت عمليات تحرير الموصل.
و یکم جار اخوانی پشمرگه و سرباز عراقی تکل دبی لشرکی.
Bunun dışında kalmamız mümkün değil.
Hello and welcome to this special edition of the Newsmakers with me, Andrea Sankey. We are devoting today's program to the battle for Mosul and how the operation now underway to clear Daesh from Iraq's second city could affect the balance of power in the Levant. The long-awaited operation began early on Monday when the first columns of tanks started rolling across the dusty plains of northern Iraq. Now, for the first time, the Iraqi army is joining forces with Kurdish Peshmerga, combined with air support from the U.S.-led coalition. Now, initial progress has been swift, with military commanders saying 20 villages have now been captured. But the real fight will start when the forces reach the city, home to more than 1 million people, and Daesh's last remaining stronghold in Iraq. Francis Collings reports now from Erbil on how Daesh established itself in Iraq and why the outcome of the battle for Mosul is so crucial.
Paying homage to a fallen comrade. A victim of Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi's 2012 campaign to free former Al-Qaeda and Iraq members from prison. It was the beginning of a restructuring under the self-proclaimed Caliph. The faction would eventually break away from Al-Qaeda and come to be known as Daesh. Along with prison breaks, the Break the Walls campaign also worked to foment sectarianism through attacks on Shia communities. At the same time, Sunnis took to the streets to protest against Iraq's Shia-dominated government, led by Nouri al-Maliki, accusing it of discrimination. All of this would soften the ground for the next phase of Daesh's strategy, Soldiers' Harvest. Iraqi troops manning checkpoints were increasingly attacked, and Iraqi officials targeted with improvised explosive devices. Iraqi security forces were depleted and intimidated. With morale at a low, the stage was set for an incursion by Daesh that would shock the world. Daesh was born in Iraq. A number of Sunni officers who were pushed out of the military after the fall of Saddam Hussein joined the group. The de-Baathification process left many Sunnis resentful of both the US and the Shia-led government in Baghdad. But Daesh would mature in Syria, with its fighters engaging in urban, mobile warfare against rival groups. It also benefited from the expertise of foreign fighters, some of whom had served in the Balkans and Chechnya. The group then blazed a violent path across Iraq's Sunni areas and took the country's second city, Mosul, in June 2014. At its peak, Daesh controlled a third of the country. They secured supply lines that stretched from Mosul to its de facto capital in Syria, Raqqa. But a growing coalition of enemies in Syria and Iraq would loosen its stranglehold. Fallujah was the first Iraqi city to fall to Daesh in January 2014. Its liberation in June this year by Iraqi security forces with the help of Shia militias was a turning point. While to the north, Peshmerga forces have increasingly taken control of Daesh strongholds along the supply lines into Syria. Both in the north and the south, the US has backed the fight against Daesh with daily airstrikes, all in the lead-up to this announcement.
أعلن اليوم ابتداء هذه العملية لتحريركم من بطش وإرهاب داعش، وإن شاء الله قريبا نلتقي في أرض الموصل لنحتفل جميعا بتحريرها وبخلاصكم.
Iraqi security forces have dropped flyers warning of an imminent offensive, one that has long been in the making.
Because of the pre-positioning of forces, we feel confident that we will be in a position to move forward fairly rapidly.
The fight to retake Mosul is a national effort to rid the country of Daesh once and for all. It's a final foothold for the group in Iraq at a time when it's losing territory from Syria to Libya. Well, Kurdish Peshmerga forces, they're coming from the north. The Iraqi army, they're attacking from the south and the east. But this is the largest military operation since the US-led invasion of Iraq in 2003. Francis Collings, the Newsmakers in Erbil in northern Iraq.
Joining me now from Baghdad is Saad al-Mutalibi. He is a member of Iraq's governing State of Law coalition and also a member of the Baghdad Security Committee. And here in the studio, I'm joined by Ahmed al-Burai, a lecturer at Istanbul Aydın University. Thanks both so much for joining us. Let me just start in the studio with Ahmed. Does this fight for Mosul and all of its complexity and all the danger have at least that silver lining for once, that all of Iraq's forces are now working together in unity in the name of one country, or is this the calm before the storm of more sectarian violence to come if Mosul is liberated?
I think it's the second option, because if you go back to the track record of the Iraqi government and the way this happened before in Fallujah, this happened before in Ramadi, in other provinces that were held by other extremists like Al-Qaeda and even ISIS itself. So what happened later on, they promised that the popular mobilization front or units known as Hashd al-Sha'bi are not going to participate in these operations. Most of them are Shia, from the Shia sects. That's why what happened later on, they participated, and then the conflict deteriorated, and there were massive killings and more enforced disappearances, more crimes against humanity happened in these cities. That's why the people of these cities are not going to support the so-called liberation process unless they have genuine trust in the operation, and they believe that these forces came not just to get rid of ISIS, but in order to give them the alternative in the aftermath.
Saad al-Mutalibi, is your outlook any more optimistic?
Certainly, thank you very much. Obviously, one can look philosophically at events from a different view, but truth and facts have one face only. First of all, the Shia PMUs, the public mobilization units, the PMUs are not taking part in this battle. They are only to close the openings that may occur during the fighting, and to surround the city from different directions in case there would be an exodus of ISIS fighters from Mosul towards Syria, where we hope that will happen, and we anticipate that the next step for ISIL will be the withdrawal of their forces and their equipment out from Mosul into the Syrian border, trying to reach the city of Raqqa or the other cities in Syria. As for the fighting forces, it's only the official fighting forces, the Iraqi army and the Peshmerga and the federal police are taking a part in the ongoing battles, which today, by the way, we liberated Hamdaniya, the chair of the Christian society in the north, and Bashiqa, and other important point in the south of Mosul. The Peshmerga have reached their targeted positions, and they are now holding the ground there. So the anticipation of your guest, I think, is slightly far away from truth.
So you are confident that the unity of your forces will be maintained?
Definitely.
Definitely.
Without any question.
Ahmed, do you believe that the Shia forces are actually not taking part in these battles? Because Saudi authorities have come out, for example, and vehemently said that they are involved and that there will be a disaster, a violent disaster, should Mosul be liberated, particularly because of these forces.
You know, that is the crux of the whole issue. What the other guest in Baghdad said, exactly what will happen, that these popular mobilization units are going to be in the around the city, and they're going to capture everybody who is fleeing from the residents of the city itself. And that's the big concern, that's the worry of the city residents. They're going to flee ISIS, but unfortunately at the end what they're going to receive these militias, these forces. They're going to punish them collectively. They're going to because they will accuse them of being either complicit in a Daesh crimes, or they're being covering Daesh and they're being affiliates to Daesh, and they cannot prove this. They're going to be extrajudicial killings, and what Amnesty International today just said, that this is going to happen, and this is not an isolated incident. It is a kind of a systematic collective punishment to the people who are escaping the territories held by ISIS.
Okay, Saad al-Muttalibi, I can see you smiling in disagreement, actually.
Yes, it's really funny the way some analysts have been moving towards insisting that the PMUs will take part in this battle. The Saudis were warning, as the Turks warned, and even inside Iraq, we are warning our friends and brothers, the PMUs, to take an impartial position and only to make sure that the openings are closed. As for the population of Mosul, we have instructed them not to leave Mosul. Until today is the second day of the battle, we have 120 targets inside Mosul was destroyed today by aircraft, Iraqi and American aircraft. And until today, not one member of the Mosul society have left the city.
Can I jump in here?
Because we've instructed them, they all should stay. They should stay in Mosul, and none of them should leave.
The point is to ask the people to stay in Mosul. That is a crime against humanity, because you know the massive power you're going to use in this, and you know that ISIS itself has captured the whole city, and it will not hesitate to turn the whole city to rubble. That's on the one hand. On the other hand, if the people flee, if they escape this fire, where they're going to leave? Did you give them safe corridors to leave? No, you didn't. And this, what Amnesty, again, I refer back to the Amnesty International report today and yesterday, they said that they're going to forcibly disappear, and they're going to be tortured if they're going to be, and they have like testimonies and lots of eyewitnesses. This happened before. We're not speaking from a different word. We're speaking from track records of Fallujah, of Ramadi, of other provinces that have been recaptured from these extremists.
Saad, I'll give you a quick minute to respond, and I'd like to move on to another topic. Go ahead.
Yes, well, first of all, Amnesty International don't have an office here in Baghdad. They are speaking from eyewitnesses, supposedly eyewitnesses, and from quarters that are definitely associated in one way or another to either to ISIS or to the Ba'athists or to regional powers. So it's within their interest for those individuals to tarnish the reputation of Iraq and the armed forces. All this gentleman, Mr. Ahmed, have said now, have no proof on the ground whatsoever. All these are made-up stories. And I was in Fallujah, I was in Salahuddin, I was in Ramadi, and I've seen with my own eyes the positive treatment of the civilians and the legal treatment with the ISIS members who were turned on by the population. The population told us that this man is ISIS and this woman was doing so and so in the market and she's ISIS. The population themselves, they introduced ISIS to us. Also in Mosul, we have a complete list of all the ISIS collaborators.
Okay.
So there is no innocent individual will be accused falsely.
Okay. Now, another issue at play here is the role of Turkey. I'd like to listen to quickly what President Erdogan had to say.
Bakın şimdi Musul başladı. Şu anda
Look, now the operation in Mosul has started.
ne diyorlar?
The operation continues.
Türkiye Musul'a girmesin.
What did they say? Turkey shouldn't enter Mosul. Hey, how can I do that?
350 kilometre
I share
sınırım var.
350 kilometers of border with Iraq, and I'm under threat on that border. Turkey shares 911 kilometers of border with Syria, 350 kilometers with Iraq. Look, we are not responsible for the possible results of an operation carried out without Turkey. We will be in the Mosul operation and we will be at the table. It's not possible for us to stay out.
Bunun dışında kalmamız mümkün değil.
So Turkey has a right to be involved, according to the president, and it stresses the constructive role it can play. Saad al-Muttalibi, what do you see as Turkey's role in this conflict?
We definitely understand Turkey's anxieties, and we advise them to make sure that they hold their side of the border tightly and prevent any ISIS incursion from inside Iraq into Turkey, and make sure that the Turkish side of the border is well protected. The same advice we gave to the Iranians. Iranians also, if Turkey enters Iraq, I do believe that Iran will also want their tanks and aircraft and their military gear to be in Iraq also, and in competition with the Turks. So we cannot allow any international force to enter Iraq with military hardware into our soil. They can be as trainers, they can help us in supply, they can help us with information and intelligence, but actual tanks and guns, these are definitely, we didn't allow the Americans to do that, let alone Turkey or Iran.
Okay, Ahmed.
I think this is a little bit ridiculous to say that the Americans are not involved. We all know the Americans have been in Baghdad, in Iraq since 2003, and they didn't leave. And that's one point. The other point, Mr. al-Abadi himself came here to Turkey in 2014, and he asked Turkey to train and give more logistic services to the soldiers, the Iraqi soldiers in Bashika camp. So how come now he's not asking Turkey to take part in that? That's one part. The other part is Turkey have real concern, because we all know that Turkey will take the biggest share if the influxes of the refugees start. And they will immediately head to the Turkish border, and the northern Kurdistan of Iraq will not be able to host any of them, because they're already hosting 1.5 million of them. That's from one hand. From the other hand, after, we all know that ISIS will be defeated, Daesh will be defeated. Sooner or later, they will be defeated. But the point is, the day after, the security, the reconstruction, the representative governance, who is going to guarantee that? I believe the only power, regional power, that has proven that in Syria, in the latest Euphrates Shield, is Turkey. And Turkey is offering this alternative to the coalition.
Okay. Saad al-Muttalibi, final words.
I don't understand why Mr. Ahmed given himself and Turkey the right to determine what form of government should be set in Mosul or any other Iraqi province. This feeling of grandeur and the Turks' empire or the Ottoman Empire, I think that ceased about 100 years ago. Iraq is an independent country, and we definitely, if the Turks take part in any military operation, they will be targeted as enemies.
Okay, Ahmed, go ahead. Quick final words then from you.
You know, it's again the paradox and the irony here that Turkey, as a brother country to Iraq, everybody wants a sovereign, independent Iraq to be there intact, and the government institutions are not touched. Neither Iran nor Turkey nor any other party or any other country would interfere there and do anything. But when the government itself is representing the whole spectrum of the Iraqi factions, and that's not happening by the Iraqis, that's why Turkey finds itself forced to intervene. Otherwise, we will live again the other kind of a demographic change, other kind of sectarian violence that may evolve, and Turkey will be hurted anyway.
Okay, Ahmed, I'm going to let you have the last word, but do stay with us. You'll be joining us later in the program. I'd like to thank Saad al-Muttalibi so much for joining us with his insight from Baghdad. Well, let's get more now on how the battle for Mosul could affect Daesh and regional security more generally. Still with me here in the studio is Ahmed al-Burai, and joining us now from Washington, D.C. is Jacob Polidort, an expert on Daesh at the Washington Institute for Near East Policy. We'll have more from both of you in just a moment, but first, Let's get this report from Natalie Pohonen on how Daesh is now fighting on several fronts.
At the height of its so-called caliphate, Daesh controlled vast areas of Syria and nearly a third of Iraq. But since 2015, its foothold on the region has been shrinking. And between January and September this year, Daesh has lost even more ground. And it might now be on the verge of losing its last stronghold in Iraq, Mosul. The push by the Iraqi army and the Peshmerga, backed by the US coalition, is the biggest territorial blow the terrorist group has faced.
But this is obviously an important part of this broader effort to degrade and ultimately destroy ISIL.
If it succeeds, it would diminish Daesh's claim to a caliphate and pivot the fight to battlefields in Syria. The group has already been losing ground there. In recent weeks, it's been forced out of Jarablus and Manbij as part of Operation Euphrates Shield. It has lost vital road access and supply bases to fuel its fight. And at the weekend, Syrian fighters backed by Turkey reclaimed Dabik. The group's propaganda magazine is named after the town. Coalition airstrikes in Syria have killed fighters and Daesh leaders, including its official spokesman, Abu Muhammad al-Adnani, in August. These blows are both strategic and symbolic losses inside Syria, where the group's ability to hold ground is being tested. With these latest pushes in Iraq and Syria, is the end near for Daesh? Natalie Pohonen, The Newsmakers.
Well, let's get straight to Washington then, and let me ask Jacob, is this the operation that will break the back of Daesh?
Yes, thank you very much, first of all, for having me on your program. It'll definitely break the back of the organization, but not the legs. And what I mean by that is that the group has proven very agile in terms of its messaging and its narrative to spin losses and various kinds of military operations to meet its ends. Obviously, this will be the hardest symbolic and strategic hit to the group, but there are a number of scenarios I see of how it'll spin this message. If you looked in the last couple of months, the group was able to either avoid mention of any losses of Manbij or to minimize its loss of Dabik, kind of saying that that was not the prophesied apocalyptic battle. What I see is taking place going forward is, first of all, kind of three operational and messaging themes that you'll see. First, focusing on sites of potential victory, so Sharqat, other places in Syria and Iraq, as well as ISIS provinces, which it's been messaging about. The second is targeting Shiite communities, and we saw a suicide attack yesterday as well, driving a wedge within Iraqi society between Sunnis and Shiites. And third is what I call near-range terrorist activity. I don't anticipate any large-scale attacks on Western targets in the short term, but certainly more likely is attacks potentially in Turkey or Saudi Arabia, where the group has a support base and where those ends are more attainable.
So you don't expect Western targets to be attacked in the near future, but European authorities right now are very concerned about Daesh fighters being dispersed in Iraq and in Syria, for that matter, crossing back into Turkey and making their way back to Europe. Do you think those concerns are legitimate, or are they being slightly exaggerated given the context now?
I think they're absolutely legitimate. I just think it's a question of chronology as I see it. And I think right now we're going to see potentially a focus by the group on bringing its members into Syria from Mosul after the months-long fight. And then potentially, again, as experts are saying, to targeting Western sites as well. So I don't think, just to be clear, I don't think that the targeting of Europe and the United States is off the table by the group. I just think that right now the priority for them will be sort of realigning their ranks and strategic reconfiguring of what's the next target.
Okay. Ahmed, let me get your take on that. Breaking the back of Daesh, but not the legs.
I don't think that Daesh is going to give up easily. They're going without a fight. They're going to fight and fight fiercely. And we may, in the near future, we may have a bloodbath in the city because it's the last stronghold. And there are reports coming from the city that the affiliates already planted the whole city with mines. And again, what we are talking about is they're going to be defeated by a way or another, but are they going to re-emerge to reorganize themselves, maybe rebrand themselves, because Al-Qaeda already has been defeated. And then what happened, the new generation of ISIS or Daesh has emerged. That's why I think we should be talking about the causes rather than the efforts.
You just led into my next question. I mean, are we actually witnessing the winding down of this terrorist organization, or is this just part of a terrorist creation cycle whereby they are recycled under another brand, under another name? Jacob, go ahead.
Yes, certainly. I mean, I very much agree with Ahmed's point. I mean, I think that this is far from the end of ISIS, and I think if one thing the group has proven skilled at, it's the branding and marketing strategy that it's pursued. It has still devotees across the world. It remains prolific on social media and disseminating its propaganda in, I would say, dozens of languages. So this is, to Ahmed's point, I think that we might see an ISIS 2.0, 3.0. This is, in fact, 3.0 probably more likely. This is 2.0 after AQI. Where the difference might change, I think, is the location of where ISIS 3.0 might crop up. And that has a lot to do with regional stability, kind of political, territorial vacuums.
And let me ask you if you can speak to this, Jacob, from kind of an inside perspective. Now, this is assuming that such a thing like morale actually exists for a terrorist organization like Daesh, but Daesh has wanted this caliphate in Iraq, in Syria, and Libya. If Mosul succeeds, they're only left in Syria, and it looks like that could also be under serious threat for Daesh too. Where does that leave morale for an organization like Daesh?
Well, it's a very important question. It's the key question here. My own view is, of course, as you mentioned, the next site will be Raqqa, which probably will be much more swift takeover. It's about 200,000 residents there. But I think the key to understanding ISIS's morale and really its credibility is the fact that it has already achieved this caliphate state that it talked about. And that's already something that they've been talking about in their propaganda for weeks now, anticipating the Mosul offensive, is that, look, here is a generation that's already witnessed 2 years' worth of a caliphate state. So whether or not we win or lose, on the ground, we were the only ones who were able to deliver on that, and they could potentially sustain that in their literature as well, which they're doing. Jacob
Alidor, I'm going to give you the last word. Thank you so much for joining us there from Washington, and thanks so much again, Ahmed, for joining us here in the studio on the Newsmakers. You've been watching this special edition of the Newsmakers on the battle for Mosul with me, Andrea Sankey. Now, as we've been discussing, it's an operation that will likely have enormous consequences for the balance of power in the region. There could be several weeks, even months, of fighting ahead. But we leave you now with these images from the first 2 days of the battle.